Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, esteemed guests, thank you for coming here today and allowing us to all participate in this incredible discussion of how we can build each one of your countries as partners. Because education in the end is the foundation for everything that will happen in the future. I'm going to go maybe a little quickly and focus on not necessarily everything that I had prepared, because I would like to spend a lot of time listening to each of you. But I was asked to, and again, please forgive me, but I was asked to highlight some of the research on some of the struggles that some of your countries are facing, but there's actually some very interesting positive news about some of the work that some of your countries have done that will also be visible here. So we have a lot to work on, but I think we have a lot to learn from each other as well. So on the kind of sad side of like we've got some work to do, despite only being a quarter of the global population of ICESCO member states, of what that is of the overall global population, ICESCO member states account for half of the children who are in learning poverty. Now, if we remember, learning poverty is the term the World Bank has given us to try to help us understand what it means for a child not to be able to read in their national language, in their home language, a pretty simple sentence when they're 10 years old. And so just, like, I know many of you probably spend many days in the schools that you work with, but I think sometimes when we talk about these statistics, they can just go over our heads. Many of you probably have your own children or your nieces or nephews. Can you imagine if one of them is 10 and couldn't read something as simple as the cat sat on the mat, whether that was in Arabic, in French, or in English? Imagine that's your child. These are all of your children in your ministries of education in each of your countries. And that's why I think it is so important that we really feel sad when we are facing that situation. And in the countries that have big populations, obviously some of this struggle is harder. There are 44 million children in learning poverty in Nigeria and Pakistan alone, right? When you have a large population, these problems are even bigger. This is actually my favorite graph, and so I might spend more time here. It's a little hard to see from where you are, but as Director Wakas said, he will share this with you. So what this is trying to highlight is two things. So first, you have done incredible work in solving enrollment. ICESCO countries are now at 99% enrollment. You might have had a little drop due to COVID. This data is from 2020. But essentially, you're getting children into schools. But there's still a problem of learning. But there's some really interesting things here. So I come at this as a researcher. I was originally an anthropologist, and it was working with families as an anthropologist where the problem of learning poverty, of children being in school but not learning, became something I had to deal with in communities that I worked and then wanted to be part of trying to solve. But so the green countries, I'll tell you who some of these are, but so green are your high income countries. Your blue are upper middle income, orangish yellow are lower middle income, and red is low income. Now, if money determined your fate, this arc would just go green, blue, orange, red. But that's not how it goes, right? So what I actually want to call attention to is the amount of money you have today, your GDP per capita today, does not determine your fate. You can do a lot, even with a little, and there's some countries here that really stand out. So Kazakhstan and Turkey, if I'm privileged enough to have any of you here in this room, those are upper middle income countries, so they do have more resources, some more to spend, but they are outperforming every single high income country in ICESCO. I'm fascinated. I think there's a lot that I want to help research and think about of what's happening in Kazakhstan and Turkey that we can learn from. Kazakhstan is basically performing at the same average of high income countries globally. 9 out of 10 children can read. So there's a little bit there still should work on, but like that should be applauded. There's something amazing happening there. Similarly, there's an orange that is up there in between all that green and blue. Something good is happening in Uzbekistan. So Uzbekistan is a low middle income country, but is outperforming all the other ICESCO member states that are low and middle income. So again, that's something that we as a knowledge partner want to help figure this out. What lessons can we learn from these member states that are clearly outperforming what you otherwise might expect? I want the takeaway of that to be, again, that your current situation is not your destiny. Just because you are low income or low middle income doesn't mean you can't do more with what you have. There's a lot that you can. This, I don't want you necessarily to focus on it too much. I think the analyst who put this slide together, I think, is actually focusing on the wrong thing. So I'm going to have you focus on something else. So this is showing low income, lower middle income, upper middle income, high income spending, comparing ICESCO member states and non-ICESCO member states. I actually would focus on the first one. I actually think that's remarkable. So ICESCO member states that are low income are spending about 30% more on education than non-member states. That shows a real commitment to using limited resources on education to try to build for your future. But we know from the previous graph, though, that maybe that money isn't all going to things that are effective, right? So it's like, it's not just more money. Like, more money doesn't necessarily do more good. But for every dollar spent, it's really how can that do the most good? And ICESCO member states are really showing an example to the rest of the world of, even with limited resources, trying to put what you can towards learning. Now, in lower middle and upper middle income, we have ICESCO member states are spending a bit less than non-ICESCO member states. That might make you think about that. You know, like, could we spend more? But that's even something that Dr. Hadi Jotuse mentioned earlier, that from the Muscat Declaration, that there was an agreement around how to try to prioritize spending on education, and that would close that gap. How to forge ahead. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because this is what Dr. Hadi has already shared with you. These were agreements mostly through the Muscat Declaration research that we've been part of, along with other organizations, is that in places where it has been studied, providing your teachers with structured pedagogy, with support, with providing them with lesson plans to ensure every teacher has a base consistent coursework with lesson plans that help them make sure they cover everything the way you want them to, really does support learning gains significantly. Targeted instruction. If any of you heard the speech I was able to give at EWF yesterday, it's actually one of my favorite graphs, but it's down here actually. I'll skip to it. This one. I do find this, for me personally, the most challenging conversation I have with ministers, and I wish it wasn't. But for some reason it is. So maybe after you each speak here, find me outside and tell me why this is hard, because I want to understand it better from your point of view. You create a curriculum when you're designing your overall education standards and policies, and you decide what skills every child should have mastered by the end of grade 1, by the end of grade 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to grade 12 or the end of secondary school. And that is critical. Like, you as the Ministry of Education and the rest of your cabinet need to decide what your country's trying to achieve. What do you want your children to know? Then the role of your teachers and any organizations working with you, supporting your teachers, is to get the children to know that. But if that hasn't been happening, if that's not been working, if you're suffering from learning poverty, then you see something like this, where the red lines are where your curriculum standards are. Like, that's the level of difficulty for the concepts in, like, this is numeracy. Both of these are actually mathematics standards. One is from a state in Nigeria, one happens to be a state in India. Red would be if we use the materials that were approved by the ministry, that's how hard they would be. But the blue dots is where the kids' current learning levels are. So what happens when you ask your teachers to just use the materials that are slated for grade 3, grade 5, grade 6? No one's going to learn anything. And that's really why those blue dots are all sitting at the bottom, because you actually need to assess what's happening in your schools, assess the learning levels of the children, and then have the courage to admit that maybe we need to take a few steps back so that we can actually run ahead. Because if we give those children in grade 3 and grade 4 early reading content, the reading content that you probably have scheduled to teach in grade 1, but give it to them in grade 3 and 4, they're actually going to learn how to read. And they're neurologically more advanced, so they're going to learn how to read a lot faster than a 6-year-old would. You'll be able to help your teachers go faster. And then you're going to start being able to catch up to your grade level standards. But if you say you have to follow your grade level standards right now, no matter what, even when you see assessment data like this, it's never going to change. Those blue dots are never going to rise to the red line, which is what you want. Because we have to be willing to accept maybe where we are and then say, okay, but I'm not happy with that. I need to do the work to change it. But that means we need to use content that is actually where the kids need to be. And so I can turn over the rest of my time to you. I'm just going to skip to this. Those of you who were in my session yesterday, this was maybe my second favorite graph. So again, back to your current economics not being destiny. Back in 1960, the average GDP per capita in sub-Saharan Africa was about $150 per person. That's the same as it was in South Korea in 1960. But now, South Korea is over $36,000. They've grown their economy by over 240 times. But where I live, I've lived in Nairobi for almost 20 years now. The average sub-Saharan GDP per capita is only $1,600. That's why we're still mostly in that continent living in low-income or lower middle-income countries. But it didn't have to be that way, right? You can change things. And if you want, I will send you every research report written by various economists. A great one is Eric Hanushek. He is at Stanford. He has spent his life studying what is correlated to countries growing their economies. Just what? If we could solve that, wouldn't everyone just want to do what actually worked? Turns out it's known. 75% of all variance between countries' economic growth is related to foundational learning. Did the country change the cognitive skill levels of their entire population? Doesn't work if you just do it in one city or you just do it for 10% of the kids. That's not what's going to change your economy. You have to actually support every child learning. So your whole population then becomes part of your creative force, then becomes part of your workforce, then becomes part of your leaders and your idea makers and your creative population. If we only have 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 kids grow up to be able to contribute to your future, that's when we remain in poverty. So I actually think each one of you has the most amazing job on earth. Getting to be a minister of education means you hold the future of your country in your hands with your decisions. And so I just hope at the end of this great week, where I hope each of you feels maybe both the weight of your work, I want you to feel the hope of your work and how much you can do and the future that you are going to build. So thank you.